Ambassador Elena Vasquez adjusted her simple black suit as she walked through the gleaming corridors of the Zephyrian Imperial Palace. The walls around her rose like crystalline mountains, reflecting the harsh blue light that the Empire's leaders preferred. Every step echoed with a metallic ring against the polished floors, a sound that seemed to announce her presence to the countless alien dignitaries who watched her pass. She was human, and that made her an oddity here. In the 300 years since first contact, humanity had remained stubbornly neutral in galactic politics. While other species formed massive military alliances or cowered before the might of the Zephyrian Empire, humans simply traded, explored, and maintained their small collection of colony worlds on the galaxy's outer rim. The Zephyrians found this behavior deeply suspicious. Elena carried no weapons, wore no armor, and brought no military escort. Her only companion was a simple leather briefcase that contained nothing more threatening than diplomatic papers and a few personal items. To the heavily armed Zephyrian guards who lined the corridors, she must have seemed laughably unprepared for what was about to unfold. The throne room doors stretched 30 feet high, carved from a single piece of midnight black stone that had been harvested from the Empire's capital moon. They opened silently as Elena approached, revealing a chamber that could have held a small city. At its center, Emperor Craxus the Destroyer sat upon a throne made from the fused hulls of conquered warships, his four arms spread wide in a gesture that conveyed both welcome and threat. Craxus stood nearly 12 feet tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming with the scars of 1,000 battles. His species had evolved from predatory hunters, and every line of his body spoke to that heritage. Sharp mandibles framed a mouth filled with razor teeth, while compound eyes tracked Elena's every movement with predatory focus. Ambassador Vasquez, the Emperor's voice boomed through hidden speakers, translated instantly into human standard. "How good of you to accept our invitation." Elena smiled pleasantly and inclined her head in the minimal bow that human diplomatic protocol required. Not the deep genuflection that other species performed, but just enough to acknowledge his rank without surrendering her dignity. "Your Majesty," she replied, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "I appreciate the opportunity to discuss our people's relationship." Craxus's mandibles clicked together in what Elena recognized as amusement. Around the throne room, dozens of high-ranking officials from across the Empire watched the exchange with obvious interest. Representatives of the warrior Krellians, the hive-minded Vortakans, and the cybernetically enhanced Nexans all stood in carefully arranged groups, their alien features marked by expressions Elena had learned to read over her years in diplomatic service. They expected this to be a surrender. "Relationship," Craxus repeated, savoring the word. "Yes, that is precisely what we must discuss. You see, Ambassador, the Empire has grown concerned about humanity's independence. While other species have seen the wisdom in joining our great confederation, humans continue to chart their own course. Elena nodded dojehashfully. We value our autonomy, certainly, but we've always maintained peaceful relations with the Empire. Our trade agreements have been mutually beneficial, and we've never interfered with imperial interests." "Peaceful," the Emperor mused. "Such an interesting concept. But, you see, Ambassador, the galaxy is changing. The Outer Rim territories have become strategically important, and the Empire requires certain assurances about their governance." Here it came. Elena had expected this moment from the instant she received the Imperial summons. The Zephyrian Empire had spent the last decade consolidating control over the galaxy's major trade routes, and humanity's independent colonies sat directly across several key passages. "What sort of assurances?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. Emperor Craxus leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the polished floor. "Integration, Ambassador. Full membership in the Empire, with all the responsibilities and protections such membership entails. Your colonies would become imperial territories, your defense forces would join the Imperial Navy, and your people would enjoy the security that comes from being part of the greatest military power in galactic history. And if we decline this generous offer," The Emperor's compound eyes glittered with what Elena recognized as genuine pleasure. Then, the Empire would be forced to consider humanity a potential threat to galactic stability. And threats, Ambassador, must be eliminated. Elena maintained her pleasant expression even as murmurs rippled through the assembled alien dignitaries. Several species had received similar ultimatums over the past century. Some had submitted immediately and been absorbed into the Empire with their leadership intact. Others had resisted and been crushed so thoroughly that their homeworlds now served as museums to Imperial might. I see, Elena said quietly. And how much time do we have to consider this proposal? Time. Craxus's mandibles clicked rapidly. Ambassador, you misunderstand. This is not a proposal requiring lengthy deliberation. The Empire has already made its decision. We are simply informing you of the new reality. Elena reached into her briefcase and withdrew a single sheet of paper. The gesture caused several guards to tense, their hands moving toward their weapons, but Elena's movements remained slow and deliberate. She unfolded the document and read it carefully, though she had memorized its contents long before arriving at the Imperial Palace. Your Majesty, she said finally, I'm afraid I must respectfully decline your offer of integration. The throne room fell completely silent. Emperor Craxus slowly rose from his seat, his full height making him tower over even his tallest guards. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. You refuse. We do. You understand what this means? Elena folded the paper carefully and returned it to her briefcase. When she looked up, her smile remained unchanged, but something in her eyes had shifted. The assembled aliens would later describe it as the moment they realized they had been watching the wrong person in this conversation. Your Majesty, Elena said, her voice carrying a note of genuine warmth. I believe you may have misunderstood something fundamental about humanity's position in this galaxy. She reached into her briefcase again, this time withdrawing a small, unremarkable wooden stick with a sulfur tip. The Emperor's eyes tracked the object with confusion, clearly unable to identify any threat in such a primitive tool. Elena smiled wider and struck the match against her briefcase's leather surface. The tiny flame that erupted seemed almost insignificant in the vast throne room, but every alien in the chamber watched it with sudden, inexplicable unease. The Empire chose war, Elena said softly, holding the flickering flame between them. That was your decision to make. But you should have asked yourselves one question before issuing your ultimatum. Emperor Craxus leaned forward, his predatory instincts focused entirely on the small human before him. And what question is that, Ambassador? Elena's smile never wavered as she spoke her next words, her voice carrying clearly through the absolute silence of the throne room. You should have asked why a species capable of building starships still carries matches. The small flame from Elena's match cast dancing shadows across the Emperor's scarred exoskeleton, but the real illumination came from the confusion spreading across his compound eyes. Around the throne room, alien dignitaries shifted nervously, their various appendages twitching as they tried to process the human's cryptic statement. Matches. Emperor Craxus's voice carried a note of contempt. You threaten the might of the Galactic Empire with a primitive fire-making tool. Elena let the match burn for another moment before blowing it out with a gentle breath. The smoke curled upward in the recycled atmosphere, carrying with it a scent that none of the aliens recognized, but somehow found deeply unsettling. Not a threat, Your Majesty, she corrected, tucking the spent match into her jacket pocket with the care of someone handling a precious artifact. An answer to a question you never thought to ask. The Krellian war chief Thoktar stepped forward from his position among the observer delegation, his 6 arms rippling with barely contained aggression. His species had served as the Empire's primary shock troops for over 2 centuries, and the confusion in the room was making his predatory instincts itch. Human, he growled, his translator rendering his words in a tone that suggested imminent violence. Speak plainly or be silent forever. Elena turned toward the massive warrior with the same pleasant expression she had maintained throughout the audience. Thoktar stood nearly 9 feet tall, and weighed close to 800 pounds, his thick hide marked by ritual scarification that told the story of his many victories. His upper arms ended in hands capable of crushing steel, while his lower arms bore the surgically attached plasma cannons that marked him as a veteran of the Empire's most brutal campaigns. "Of course," Elena replied politely. "I was simply wondering why a civilization that has conquered most of the galaxy never bothered to study human history very carefully." Emperor Craxus's mandibles clicked in irritation. "We know your history, Ambassador. Primitive apes who discovered fire, developed agriculture, built cities, and eventually reached for the stars. Nothing particularly remarkable when compared to the noble species that comprise our empire." Primitive apes Elena repeated fully. "Yes, that's certainly one perspective. But you seem to have missed some rather important details." She began walking slowly around the base of the throne, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. The guard tracked her movement, but made no move to interfere, clearly unable to perceive any threat from such a small, unarmed figure. "For instance," Elena continued, "did you know that humans are the only known species to develop nuclear weapons before achieving interstellar travel?" A ripple of interest passed through the assembled aliens. Most species had discovered atomic energy as a relatively late development, usually centuries after mastering faster-than-light technology. The physics involved were considered too dangerous for younger civilizations to safely handle. "We nearly destroyed our own planet with those weapons," Elena said conversationally. "Multiple times, in fact. But we didn't. Do you know why?" Vexera, the Nexan Cybernetic Collective's primary node, spoke for the first time during the audience. Her voice emerged from dozens of implanted speakers, creating an eerie harmonic effect. "Logic would suggest fear of mutual annihilation." "Close," Elena agreed, "but not quite accurate. Fear was certainly part of it, but the real answer is much simpler. We learned to control ourselves." Emperor Craxus leaned back in his throne, his massive frame creating new patterns of shadow across the chamber floor. "And this lesson in human psychology is relevant how?" Elena stopped walking and faced the throne directly. "Your Majesty, what do you suppose happens to a species that develops the capability for total self-destruction while still confined to a single planet, but manages to survive the experience?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Elena could see the various alien minds working through the implications. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered species across half the galaxy, but they had never encountered a civilization quite like humanity. "Such a species," Elena continued when no answer came, "learns very different lessons than those who develop their destructive capabilities gradually across multiple worlds and centuries of expansion. We learned to think in terms of absolute consequences while we still had only one home to lose." Thoktar's plasma cannons began to hum with building energy, their targeting systems automatically locking onto Elena's position. "Enough philosophy, human. State your intentions plainly." Elena smiled and reached in her briefcase once more. This time she withdrew a small, innocent-looking device that resembled nothing more than an antique pocket watch. She held it up for all to see, its polished surface reflecting the throne room's harsh lighting. "This," she said simply, "is a dead man's switch." The words hit the assembly like a physical blow. Several of the smaller alien dignitaries actually took steps backward, while the guards' weapons systems began charging with audible whines and clicks. "Impossible," Emperor Craxus snarled, rising to his full height. "Our sensors detected no weapons, no explosives, no threatening technology of any kind." "Of course not," Elena agreed cheerfully. "There are none here. This device doesn't control any explosives in this room, or even on this planet." She paused, letting the implications sink in before continuing. "You see, Your Majesty, when humans discovered that we were not alone in the galaxy, we faced a simple strategic reality. We were numerically insignificant, technologically inferior, and militarily helpless against any serious galactic power. So we did what humans have always done when facing impossible odds, which is Vexera's harmonics carried a note of genuine curiosity. We changed the game entirely. Elena pressed a small stud on the side of the device, and, suddenly, every communication system in the throne room activated simultaneously. Holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, each showing the same image. A star map of the galaxy with hundreds of small red dots scattered across its spiral arms. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena announced, "I present Project Damocles, humanity's contribution to galactic stability." The red dots began to pulse in unison, and text scrolled beside each marker providing coordinates, stellar classifications, and estimated population for the systems they represented. Emperor Craxus stared at the display with growing horror as he recognized what he was seeing. "Those are Imperial core worlds," he whispered. "Among others," Elena confirmed. 317 star systems, to be precise. Each one home to at least 1 billion sentient beings. Each one now containing a carefully positioned, undetectable, and completely unshielded antimatter device. The throne room erupted in chaos as alien voices rose in panic, rage, and disbelief. Guards activated their weapons while diplomats shouted questions in dozens of different languages. Through it all, Elena stood calmly in the center of the storm, still holding her simple dead man switch. "Ow!" Craxus's voice cut through the noise with the authority of absolute power. "How did you position such devices without our knowledge?" Elena's smile grew wider. "Your Majesty, you've been trading with humanity for 3 centuries. Our merchant ships have visited every major system in the Empire countless times, always declaring their cargo manifests honestly and completely." She gestured toward the holographic displays. "Household goods, entertainment systems, food preparation devices, medical equipment, children's toys. All exactly what we said they were. All functioning perfectly as advertised. All completely harmless. Until now," Thoktar growled, his weapons fully charged and aimed directly at Elena's head. "Until now," Elena agreed pleasantly. "You see, the devices weren't weapons when we sold them to you. They were just ordinary products with one tiny additional feature. Each one contains a small quantity of antimatter in perfect containment, completely inert unless triggered by a very specific quantum frequency." She held up the dead man's switch again. "This frequency?" Emperor Craxus slowly settled back onto his throne, his predatory mind finally grasping the full scope of what he was facing. "You're bluffing. No species would be insane enough to deploy such weapons." Elena's expression never changed, but something in her voice grew very cold. "Your Majesty, we're the species that invented nuclear warfare while still living in caves and calling ourselves civilized. What part of our history suggests we wouldn't be exactly that insane?" The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the quiet humming of charged weapons and the soft glow of holographic star maps showing the Empire's most precious worlds hanging in the balance. The standoff stretched for long minutes as alien minds processed the impossible situation Elena had presented. The holographic displays continued their gentle pulsing, each red dot representing billions of lives hanging in the balance of one human's decision. Emperor Craxus sat motionless on his throne of conquered ships, his compound eyes fixed on the small device in Elena's steady hand. "You're claiming," Vexera finally spoke, her harmonic voice carefully controlled, "that humanity has effectively held the entire galaxy hostage for 3 centuries. "Hostage is such an ugly word," Elena replied. "We prefer to think of it as insurance. After all, we've never actually threatened anyone. We simply took precautions against the day someone might threaten us." War Chief Thoktar's plasma cannons remained trained on Elena's position, but confusion had replaced aggression in his scarred features. "These devices you speak of, they would have required massive resources to construct and deploy. Our intelligence networks would have detected such an operation." Elena nodded approvingly. "Excellent point. You're absolutely right that such an operation would be impossible to hide using conventional methods. That's why we didn't use conventional methods." She gestured toward the holographic displays with her free hand. Tell me, War Chief, how many human merchant vessels have visited Imperial space over the past 3 centuries? Thoktar's auxiliary brain implants flickered as he accessed the relevant databases. Approximately 47,000 registered trading ships, plus uncounted smaller craft and private vessels. And how many of those ships were searched for contraband or security threats? The silence that followed answered Elena's question more clearly than words. The human reputation for honesty in trade was legendary throughout the galaxy. Human merchants were known for declaring their cargo manifests with obsessive accuracy, for paying their taxes promptly, and for adhering to local regulations with almost religious devotion. We never had reason to suspect. Admiral Zekthaz of the Imperial Navy interjected from his position near the throne. His cybernetic implants whirred softly as he processed tactical data. Human trade goods were always exactly what they claimed to be. They still are, Elena confirmed. Every single device we sold you functions perfectly for its advertised purpose. The antimatter component is just an added feature that we never felt obligated to mention. Emperor Craxus finally found his voice again. This is insanity. Even if your claims are true, activating such devices would constitute the largest act of genocide in galactic history. Your own species would be remembered as monsters. Elena's expression remained pleasant, but her tone grew thoughtful. Your Majesty, you assume we would activate all the devices. But that's not how deterrence works. She pressed another control on her device, and the holographic displays shifted. Most of the red dots disappeared, leaving only a handful scattered across the galaxy's spiral arms. These 7 systems, Elena explained, represent approximately 1% of the total deployment. They're also strategically chosen demonstration sites, far enough from major population centers to minimize collateral damage, but prominent enough to make our point unmistakably clear. The remaining dots pulsed more rapidly, and new data scrolled beside them showing evacuation routes, emergency protocols, and estimated casualty figures. Each of these systems has received detailed advance warning, Elena continued. Evacuation fleets are already en route to remove all civilian populations. Military personnel have been given the choice to leave or remain at their posts. Admiral Zekthaz's tactical implants sparked as he processed the implications. You're offering a demonstration rather than immediate annihilation. We're offering proof of concept, Elena corrected. 7 stars will die to show that our capability is real. After that, the Empire will need to decide whether it wants to test our resolve any further. Emperor Craxus's mandibles clicked rapidly as his predatory mind worked through the strategic realities. And if we refuse? If we call your bluff? Elena's smile never wavered. Then, humanity dies fighting your Majesty. But we take the Empire with us. The simple statement hit the assembled aliens like a shockwave. They had encountered many species during their campaigns of conquest, but never one that approached warfare with such absolute commitment to mutual destruction. You would destroy yourselves just to spite us. Thoktar's voice carried genuine bewilderment. Spite has nothing to do with it, Elena replied. This is simply pragmatism. A species that allows itself to be enslaved by a superior force will eventually be eliminated anyway. History teaches us that tyrants always grow bolder with success. She gestured toward the holographic displays again. But a species that demonstrates the capability and will to exact an unacceptable price for aggression tends to be left alone. It's basic deterrence theory, really. Vexera's cybernetic consciousness processed thousands of potential scenarios in the space between heartbeats. The mathematics are elegant, she admitted reluctantly. Mutual assured destruction scaled to galactic proportions. Exactly, Elena agreed, though I prefer to think of it as mutual assured survival. As long as everyone understands the rules, nobody has to die unnecessarily. Emperor Craxus slowly rose from his throne once more, his massive frame casting new shadows across the chamber. And were these rules, Ambassador? Elena reached into her briefcase one final time and withdrew a small folder containing what appeared to be a simple treaty document. The Terran Non-Aggression Accord, she announced, holding the papers where everyone could see them. A very straightforward agreement, which states, Admiral Zekthaz prompted, that humanity will maintain its current territorial boundaries and make no aggressive moves against any galactic power, Elena recited from memory. In exchange, no galactic power will threaten human territory or attempt to coerce human compliance with external authority. And the enforcement mechanism? Craxus asked, though he clearly already knew the answer. Elena held up the dead man's switch again. Should any signatory to the Accord commit an act of aggression against human space, or should any threat be made to my person or to any other human diplomat engaged in peaceful activities, Project Damocles activates automatically. All of it. Thoktar's voice had dropped to a whisper. All of it, Elena confirmed cheerfully. 317 star systems, including the Imperial capital, the Krellian homeworld, the primary Nexan processing centers, and the Vortakan Queen clusters. Plus, of course, every major trade hub, military installation, and population center across the galaxy. The throne room fell silent again as the full weight of humanity's strategy settled over the assembled aliens like a suffocating blanket. They had come here expecting to dictate terms to a minor species. Instead, they found themselves staring into the abyss of their own potential extinction. Emperor Craxus finally broke the silence with a sound that might have been laughter if it hadn't carried such bitter undertones. You magnificent, terrifying, absolutely insane creatures, he said with something that might have been admiration. How long have you been planning this? Elena consulted her watch with the casual air of someone checking an appointment schedule. The initial strategy was developed approximately 273 years ago, shortly after our first formal contact with the Empire. Implementation began immediately, and the final devices were positioned 18 months ago. And you waited until now to reveal your hand. We waited until it became necessary, Elena corrected. Deterrence only works if the deterrent is credible. Today, Your Majesty, you made it necessary for us to establish that credibility. She held out the treaty document with the same pleasant smile she had worn since entering the throne room. So, shall we discuss the terms of our mutual survival? 2 hours later, the greatest military power in galactic history formally signed a non-aggression pact with a species they had intended to conquer. Emperor Craxus's signature was etched in ceremonial acid across the bottom of the treaty document, followed by the marks of every major power's representative present in the throne room. Elena watched the proceedings with the same pleasant expression she had maintained throughout the crisis, her dead man's switch now resting peacefully in her briefcase alongside the completed accord. The holographic displays had been deactivated, but their message lingered in every alien mind present. I confess, Emperor Craxus admitted as the last signature was applied, I find myself curious about something, Ambassador. Of course, Your Majesty. The match, he said, his compound eyes focusing on Elena with predatory intensity. When you struck that primitive firemaker, you spoke as though it held some deeper significance. Yet from everything you've revealed, your true weapon was far more sophisticated. Elena's smile grew wider as she reached into her jacket pocket and withdrew the spent match she had saved earlier. This little thing, she asked, holding it up to catch the throne room's harsh lighting. Yes, Your Majesty, this match represents something that I think your species has forgotten in all your centuries of conquest. Elena turned the small wooden stick between her fingers, examining its charred tip with apparent fascination. And that is the willingness to burn everything down rather than submit to tyranny. The words fell into absolute silence. Every alien in the chamber understood the implication, but Elena continued anyway. You see, humans have a rather unique relationship with fire. Most species develop it as a tool for cooking, warmth, and simple chemistry. We developed it as a weapon first, a tool second, and a symbol always. Elena began walking slowly around the chamber again, her footsteps echoing off the crystalline walls. Fire represents transformation through destruction. It can clear a forest to make room for new growth, or it can reduce a city to ash and memory. The choice depends entirely on who controls the flame. War Chief Thoktar's scarred features showed genuine puzzlement. But fire is simply a chemical process. Any species can create it. Any species can create fire, Elena agreed. But very few choose to carry matches into negotiations with galactic empires. She stopped walking and faced the assembled aliens directly. The match, gentlemen, is a reminder that humans always carry the means to start over, even if it means burning down everything we've built. Admiral Zekthaz's cybernetic implants flickered as he processed this revelation. You're saying that your entire strategy is based on humanity's willingness to commit civilizational suicide. Not suicide, Elena corrected. Evolution. Humans have destroyed our own civilizations dozens of times throughout our history. Wars, plagues, natural disasters, ideological collapses. We've survived them all by learning to rebuild from ashes. Emperor Craxus leaned forward on his throne. Other species have survived such catastrophes as well. Have they? Elena asked mildly. Or have they simply endured them? There's a difference, Your Majesty. Endurance is about preservation, survival, maintaining what you have. Evolution is about transformation, growth, becoming something greater than what you were. She held up the match again. This represents our willingness to embrace transformation, even if it requires destroying our current form. Most species fear such change. They'll accept almost any terms to preserve their existing civilization. But humans won't. Vexera's harmonic voice carried a note of understanding. Humans can't, Elena replied. It's not in our nature. We've proven repeatedly throughout our history that we'd rather die free than live in chains. The implications of this statement rippled through the chamber like shockwaves. The assembled aliens began to understand that they weren't dealing with a conventional deterrent strategy at all. They were facing a species whose entire approach to warfare was based on mutual annihilation as an acceptable outcome. This is why you developed such weapons, Emperor Craxus said slowly. Not as tools of conquest, but as instruments of freedom. Elena nodded approvingly. Now you're beginning to understand. Project Damocles isn't really about destroying star systems. It's about ensuring that humanity always retains the right to choose its own path, even if that path leads to extinction. Thoktar's plasma cannons had long since powered down, but his scarred features still showed the warrior's confusion when faced with an enemy that didn't play by conventional rules. You would truly destroy entire civilizations just to maintain your independence. We would, Elena confirmed without hesitation. But, more importantly, everyone now knows we would. That knowledge changes everything. She gestured toward the signed treaty documents. From this moment forward, humanity's independence isn't guaranteed by our military strength or our economic importance or our diplomatic cleverness. It's guaranteed by our demonstrated willingness to pay any price necessary to preserve it. Emperor Craxus was quiet for a long moment, his predatory mind working through the strategic implications of what he had learned. You've weaponized your own extinction, he finally said. We've weaponized our freedom, Elena corrected. The extinction part is just an unfortunate side effect. Admiral Zekthaz's tactical systems had been running probability calculations throughout the conversation. The mathematics are disturbing, he admitted. A species with this mindset becomes effectively unconquerable through conventional means. Unconquerable and unpredictable, Vexera added. Any conflict with humanity now carries the risk of total galactic annihilation. Elena smiled and tucked the spent match back in her jacket pocket. Which makes conflict highly inadvisable, doesn't it? Sometimes the best way to ensure peace is to make war too expensive for anyone to afford. Emperor Craxus slowly rose from his throne one final time, but this time his posture conveyed respect rather than threat. Ambassador Vasquez, I believe I speak for all present when I say that humanity has earned a rather unique position in galactic politics, which is the position of a species that everyone will be very, very careful never to anger. Elena gathered her briefcase and prepared to leave the throne room that had witnessed the birth of a new era in galactic relations. "Your Majesty, I think that's the most sensible thing anyone has said today." As she walked toward the massive doors, her footsteps echoing through the crystalline chamber, Elena paused to address the assembled aliens one final time. "Oh, and gentlemen, the next time you're tempted to issue ultimatums to a species you don't fully understand, you might want to ask yourselves why they still carry matches to diplomatic meetings." The doors closed behind her with a sound like thunder, leaving the galaxy's most powerful leaders alone with the knowledge that they had just encountered something far more dangerous than any weapon, a species that valued freedom more than survival itself. In the years that followed, the Terran Non-Aggression Accord would be studied by military strategists across the galaxy as the perfect example of deterrence through existential commitment. Human colonies would expand peacefully throughout the Outer Rim territories, their independence guaranteed not by treaties or alliances, but by the simple understanding that threatening them carried an unacceptable risk. And somewhere in the archives of human diplomatic history, Ambassador Elena Vasquez would be remembered as the woman who ended the age of galactic conquest with nothing more than a smile, a match, and humanity's oldest weapon, the absolute refusal to surrender. The match had been struck, the fire had been lit, and the galaxy would never be the same.